Today we are going to start with the October-November 2021 paper 2. The first question of the paper states that the hydrogen iodide HI is a colorless gas at RTP. Now explain why hydrogen iodide has a higher boiling point than HCl and HBr. Now, we need to understand that hydrogen iodide MR is greater than the MR of HCl and Br. And definitely, the boiling point depends on two factors. Number one, it depends on the polarity of the molecules, and on the polarity depends the type of intermolecular forces. Intermolecular forces, which indirectly depends on the number of electrons. So basically, the HI has greater number of electrons. Now, because it has greater number of electrons, it is going to have great induced dipole-dipole force between the molecules. It is going to have greater intermolecular forces, greater induced dipole force between the molecules as compared to which is going to be experienced by HCl or HBr because the number of electrons are fewer than the hydrogen iodide. Moving to the part 2 of the questions, part 2 states that there is a bar chart which shows the boiling point of HCl, HBr, and HI. The boiling point of HF, hydrogen fluoride, is not shown. Now, what do they expect us to do? The hydrogen bond form between the hydrogen fluoride molecule that is also given to us in the form of a statement. Draw a bar on the bar chart to predict the boiling point of hydrogen fluoride. As I've already given us the hint that the hydrogen fluoride has got the hydrogen bonding. So hydrogen bonding is the strongest kind of intermolecular force as compared to the induced dipole or as compared to the permanent dipole. So this is going to, the hydrogen fluoride is going to show the highest boiling point as compared to your HCl or HBr. So this is going to be the higher bar, okay, which is going to depict the higher boiling point as compared to HCl, HBr, or HI because it has hydrogen bonding. Moving ahead, we have explanation is the same because it has hydrogen bonding. So having hydrogen bonding is basically is the strongest type of intermolecular force which is present in HF. That's why it has highest boiling point as compared to the HCl, HBr, or HI. Moving further, it says that standard enthalpy change of formation, for HI is positive 26.5 kilojoules per mole. Now you have to define the term standard enthalpy change of formation. Now, this definition is for 2 marks and it states that it's basically the formation of 1 mole of a compound, or we can say that when 1 mole of a compound being formed from its constituent element in their physical state at standard condition. So this is basically your definition for enthalpy change of formation. Now it says that when the 1 mole of a compound, that's a keyword, when the 1 mole of compound, this is your basically a keyword being formed from, which is being formed from its constituent elements from in their physical state at the standard condition. Okay, so moving further, let's move to the next part of the question. And the question C states that hydrogen iodide can be formed by reacting hydrogen and iodine. The reaction is reversible and at equilibrium forms quickly at a higher temperature. So this basically states that the forward reaction is going to be your endothermic reaction. This is an endothermic reaction. If the forward reaction is an endothermic, then automatically the backward is going to be your exothermic reaction. Now they're asking you to construct an expression for the equilibrium, that's basically Kp, for the reaction between hydrogen and iodine to form hydrogen iodide. Now we have to write down the expression for the Kp, which is going to be basically P, and P is for the partial pressure for hydrogen iodide. Now this is 2 moles, so we are going to put square to that, right? Divided by partial pressure of hydrogen, okay? And then which is the product of hydrogen and iodine's partial pressure. So this is going to be your Kp expression for the equation given. In the next part, they're asking you to calculate the Kp for this reaction, the expression which we have written above. Using the same expression, we have to put the values of the partial pressure of hydrogen, iodine, and hydrogen iodide in the same expression, and we will be calculating the Kp for that. So let's write down the values now. So we will be calculating the Kp by inserting the values. So we have 400, 4,800, and the square remains the same, divided by the product of 895, which is a partial pressure for hydrogen, and 895, which is a partial pressure for iodine. When we will be simplify this, we will be getting the answer 28.76. Okay, so moving on to the third part, it says that state how the value of Kp would change, if at all, if the reaction were carried out at 100 degrees Celsius rather than 200 degrees Celsius, and you need to explain your answer. So it's a 2-mark question where you have to predict the side, which side the reaction will go, and also you have to give your explanation. As we have seen above, that the reaction is basically your reversible reaction, and it states that it's taking place at a higher temperature. So that means the forward reaction is endo and the backward is automatically exothermic. And the third part of the C states that if we are going to bring down the temperature from 200 to 100, that means we are decreasing the temperature. So on decreasing the temperature, it is always going to favor the side which is basically your exo. And we have an exothermic side is a backward, it's a reverse reaction. So automatically we can state and we can predict that this is going to, with the decrease in temperature is basically is going to favor the reverse reaction. So first of all, we are going to state, we'll say that the reaction, the reverse reaction will be favored if we decrease temperature from 200 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius, because decrease in temperature favors the exothermic reactions. So we have stated also, and we have given the reason for this uh, statement. Moving on to the D part of the question, the D part says that HI reacts with oxygen to form iodine and water. And we need to construct the equation for that. So they have already told us that it's going to produce, it's going to give you iodine and it's going to give you oxygen. So these are going to be the product when hydrogen iodide and oxygen react. So when hydrogen iodide and oxygen react, so these are going to be the product. Now what we need to do is we need to balance the equation. So 4HI is going to give us 2I2 and it's going to give you, sorry, water is going to be the product, not oxygen. So we have water here, H2O. So H2O will be 2 moles here. So that is going to be a balanced equation. Moving ahead, explain with the reference to the oxidation number why this reaction is a redox reaction. So let's write down the oxidation number on the top of the equation here. Now we know that hydrogen will remain positive in hydrogen iodide as well as in water. So they are H positive because we have two hydrogens here. Iodide is going to be -1 and we have uncombined form. We have a simple oxygen as a molecule, simple iodine as a molecule. In the uncombined form, it's going to be 0, whereas the oxygen will be -2. So we can see that iodide in the oxidation change of iodine is from iodide ions to iodine. So we can see that the change is basically there is an increase in oxidation number. Hence, we can say, hence the iodine is, or we can say the iodide ions are being oxidized. Iodide ions are being oxidized. Okay. Whereas oxygen is changing from oxygen to oxide. So oxygen's oxidation number is 0. So there is a decrease. There is a decrease in oxidation number because there's a decrease in oxidation number. Hence, we can say that oxygen is being reduced. All right, moving to the next part of the question. The next part is the hydrogen iodide can also be formed by the reaction of iodine with hydrazine N2H4, and the equation is given here. Now state the change in the pressure that would occur when 2 moles of iodine react with 1 mole of hydrazine in a sealed container at the constant temperature. You have to give explanation for your answer. So what will happen when the change in pressure will take place? So for the pressure, we have to check the volume of the reactant and the volume of gases. So we know that we have 2 plus 1, we have altogether 3 volume of gases on the reactant side, and we have 4 plus 1, that means the 5 volume of gases on the product side. So if we will be increasing the pressure, it will favor the side with the decreased or the reduced volume. So if we increase the pressure, it is going to uh, favor the backward reaction and vice versa. So change in the pressure, we can state that if we increase the pressure, the backward reaction will be favored, because increase in pressure favors the reduced volume. and decrease in pressure favors increased volume. Okay, fine. Moving ahead, uh, the part F of the question is in the laboratory, HI also can be formed by the two-step process. We have a step one where iodine is reacting with phosphorus forming Pi3, and the step two is where phosphorus triiodide react with water to give H3PO3, and it gives you hydrogen iodide in the aqueous form. We need to draw the dot and cross diagram for Pi3 molecule. We know that the phosphorus is a central atom, and the phosphorus belongs to group 5. So it will be showing a valency of 5 electron. It has a 5 valence electron. Not the valency, it shows it has a 5 valence electron. Iodine belongs to group 7, so it will be having 7 valence electrons, right? So there is going to be the sharing of 1 electron between phosphorus and iodine, each iodine atom. So this is how we will be showing the dot and cross diagram for Pi3. You can do the looping or you can just leave without looping like this. Moving ahead, we have the next part, name the type of reaction in step 2. Now, this is a reaction where the Pi3 is reacting with water, giving H3PO3 and HI. So this is a clear indication that this is basically my hydrolysis reaction. So I'll write down the name, the type of the reaction. Basically, it's hydrolysis. Okay, moving ahead, the next part is H3PO3 and HI are strong Bronsted-Lowry acid. Now, what is the meaning of the term strong and the Bronsted-Lowry acid? So you have to define both the terms. You have to define Bronsted-Lowry first, and then what do you mean by strong Bronsted-Lowry? So Bronsted-Lowry acids are basically the compounds or the substances which are proton donors, right? So which donates the proton. And strong means that these are those acids which completely dissociates in water. Creates in water to give you maximum H positive ions. So that is what they're expecting you to give. Completely dissociates in water to give maximum hydrogen ions. Coming to the next part, give the formula of the conjugate base of H3PO3. So H3PO3 is your acid, right? So acids are basically this is an acid, and acids are proton donor. So the base, it's going to be proton donor. Proton means it's your H positive ion donor. So acid has got an extra H positive ion in it. So its conjugate base will be the substance with one H positive ion less, right? So my conjugate base for H3PO3 will be with one H positive ion less. So it's going to be H2PO3 with the charge negative, because we have to balance out. Previously, there were three H positive ions, so there was no charge overall because so now there is one hydrogen ion less. So we have to balance the charge by putting a negative charge overall, right? So we have moved to the G part now. G part is organic related question, and it states that HI reacts with propene, and this is the formula for propene, to form a mixture of 1 iodopropane and 2 iodopropane. Identify which of the 1-iodopropane or 2-iodopropane is a major product for this reaction, and you have to explain your answer. Now, as far as we know, the Markovnikov rule, it says that whenever we have an unsymmetrical alkene, so whenever we have to place water or hydrogen halide, so the hydrogen is will be always attached to the carbon where already there are more hydrogen attached to it. So considering the Markovnikov rule, when we have CH3, CH double bond CH2, so if HI need to be added to this unsymmetrical propene, then H will be added to the carbon to which already more hydrogen are attached. So automatically when H is added to this, then iodine has to be added to this particular part. And sorry, this has to be a single bond, right? So basically this is what this is for 1, 2, and 3. So basically, according to the Markovnikov rule, this is basically your 2-iodopropane. So I'll say that when I have to state, so I'll state that 2-iodopropane will be the major product, will be the major product, will be the major product. Now, when they ask you the reason, what is the reason for having this as a major product, then you'll say that because of greater positive inductive effect, because of greater positive inductive effect of two alkyl group, effect of two alkyl groups. The second carbocation is basically more stable. Okay? So the secondary carbocation will be more stable, and hence 2-iodopropane will be formed. So that is going to be the reason for this. Moving to the next part, and here there's asking you for some mechanism, and they say that you have to complete the diagram to show the mechanism of the reaction of hydrogen iodide with the propene, and that forms the major product identified in the above part, G part 1, and you have to include the curly arrows, the lone pair of the electrons, and the charges as necessary. So let's start with the drawing of the mechanism. So this is a polar molecule of hydrogen iodide. So definitely the shared pair of electrons will be pulled more towards iodide, right? And we have an electron dense area. So electron dense area will be attracted towards the electrophile, which is basically my H positive. Now, when the double bond will break, I will be getting a carbocation, and this carbocation is actually bonded to CH3 and it is bonded to H, whereas the other carbon will be bonded to 3 hydrogen altogether. So this is a carbocation being formed. Now what will happen? The iodide ion, which has been heterolytically break down, it has a lone pair of electron, it's negatively charged. So this is going to, it is going to be attracted by the carbocation, right? Now this intermediate substance will, after the iodide is bonded to the carbocation, now my product is going to be formed, that is going to be 2-iodopropane. So I have CH3 here and iodine being attached to this part, hydrogen is here, and I have 3 carbon bonded to this, 3 hydrogen bonded to this carbon. Moving ahead, so this was the question number 1, which was out of 26 marks. Now comes the question number 2. It seems to be related to inorganic part, inorganic chemistry. Now, the question says that table 1 gives a physical data for some of the period 3 elements. Now, it gives you the atomic number, it gives you the bonding present in these elements, it gives you the ionization energy, the oxidation number, the maximum atomic oxidation number, and the anionic radii. Of which all elements they give you for element with the atomic number 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So basically, this is when the atomic number 11 means they're talking about sodium. This is basically magnesium. This is aluminum. Then we have silicon. Then we have phosphorus, sulfur, and the last one is chlorine. So these are the elements which I have written down taking help of the periodic table just to make me figure out things in a more easier way. Now coming to the first part, it says that complete the row in the table labeled bonding present in the element. So if you have to mark covalent, then you have to write down C there, ionic I and M stands for metallic as appropriate. Now we know that the first three are metals, so they definitely are going to have a metallic bonding. So 11, 12, and 13 will be showing metallic bonding. Now silicon basically is my giant covalent molecule, right? It's a giant covalent molecule. So it is going to have a covalent bonding. Phosphorus exists in the form of P4. So this is again going to exist as a covalent. Going to have a covalent bonding. Sulfur will be existing as AS8, that is again covalent bonding. Chlorine will be existing in the diatomic form. That's again covalent, which is already mentioned. Then they are asking you, let's move on to the part 2. The part 2 states that explain the difference. It says that explain the difference between the first ionization energy of the element with the atomic number 17, 11 to 17. So they mean that when you move from 11 to 17, what is the difference in their first ionization energy? That means when you move from 11 to 17, we can easily see that the ionization energy is increasing. Now they're asking you explain, give the reason why is it so. So we know that as you move from left to right in a period 3, what is happening? The proton number is increasing, right? So the proton number when it increases, so that leads to the increased nuclear charge. Nuclear charge. So basically we can write down increased proton number will lead to increased nuclear charge, hence increased nuclear attraction. Which will increase the first ionization energy, right? Coming to the next part of the question, and the question reads, explain the difference between the first ionization energy of the element with the atomic number 15 and 16. Let's go up and check it out. Now, when they talk about the group 15 and 16, we can see that there is a dip here. So we can see there's a drop. It's 15 is basically belonging to group 5 and 16 is the element which belong to group 6. When we talk about the group 5 and we talk about the nitrogen and sulfur, we can see that when the electrons, जब इनके electrons fill up होते हैं, तो इनके जो fill up होते हैं electrons p orbital में, तो there's only one single electron being filled in all the three orbitals, p orbitals, ठीक है, p orbital. But when we talk about the sulfur or the group 6 elements, so what happens in the p orbital? After one electron being filled, the last electron basically pairs up in the first p orbital. So because of this pairing up of the electron, the repulsion between the paired electron take place. So this repulsion helps in minimizing, in lowering down the ionization energy. So let's write it down. Write down the reason here. So what happens here due to the elements in 15 and 16, the first of all we are going to write down the elements, there is a dip in the ionization energy, or there is a drop, or you can say decrease in the first ionization energies of between 15th and 16th element, between 15th and 16th element, due to spin pair repulsion experienced in 16th element, which minimizes the need to pull the electron. Okay. Further, going further, we have the next part. Complete the row in the table labeled as maximum oxidation number. Maximum oxidation number. So let's go back to the table again. And here is the maximum oxidation number. So maximum oxidation number depends on the valence electrons. So group 11 belongs to group 1. So its valence electron is 1. So oxidation number becomes 1. This belongs to group 2. Valence electrons are 2, plus 2, then plus 3, then plus 4, plus 5, plus 6, and plus 7. So that is going to be the oxidation. So we have filled it up. Now coming to the part 5, and it says that now explain the variation in the ionic radii for the element with the atomic number 14 to 15. So they are talking about the ionic radii here. So what is happening in the ionic radii here? So basically the ionic radii, we can see that it's decreasing, right? When from element 14 till element 17. So ionic radii decrease हो रहा है, and what is the reason for the ionic radii to be decreased? So let's write down the reason. Now, since these are the anions from the element atomic number 14 to 15, and we know that these ions will be having the same configuration as the noble gas. So basically, their number of electrons are same, right? So they all these anions from 14 till 17 will be having same valence electrons. Okay, they'll be having same number of electrons, right? Now, because they will be having same number of electrons, but their proton number is gradually increasing. But their proton number is gradually increasing, leading to leading to uh, increased nuclear attraction, hence the size of anion gradually shrinks, gradually reduces or shrinks. So that's the reason for your answer. Okay, coming to the next part, B part of the question, and it states that use the axis to sketch a graph that show the trend in the melting point of the elements from 11 till 17. Now, for this, we need to, again, I'll be writing it down, the name of the elements here, the symbol for the elements. This is sodium, this is magnesium. Okay, let me rewrite it again in a better form, smaller font, sodium, magnesium, aluminium. This is silicon, this is phosphorus, this is sulfur, and this is chlorine. So sodium, magnesium, and aluminium, these are basically metals. Okay, this is my silicon is a giant macromolecule. Phosphorus I have in the form of P4, sulfur I have in the form of S8, and chlorine I have in the diatomic form. And these are basically my non-metal, and they will be having a covalent bond. Now, knowing all this fact, which we have already filled up in the table, we need to write down the melting point. Now, melting point depends on the type of bonding, and they're going to have the bonding and the type of structure they have. So these are metals and they exist in the lattice form. So gradually अब आपका जब ये metals हैं तो इनके अंदर metallic bonding होगी, तो metallic bonding जितनी strong होगी उतना ही ज्यादा melting point होगा, और metallic bonding की strength depend करती है number of delocalized electrons पर. So sodium will be losing 1 electron per cation, magnesium will be losing 2 electron per cation, and aluminium will be losing 3 electron per cation. So accordingly, their melting point, their bonding will become stronger. So sodium की metallic bonding से ज़्यादा strong होगी magnesium की, और उससे ज़्यादा strong metallic bonding होगी आपकी aluminium की. And silicon, being a giant molecule, will be having the highest melting point because it has numerous covalent bonds present. Then we have the next one, which is phosphorus. Phosphorus will be having slightly less than, because it's a covalent molecule, so it's low down there. Then sulfur will be having higher than phosphorus because it has 8 atoms combining to form sulfur together. And then we have a diatomic, which is very low. So this is how we will be showing the trends in the melting point graphically. Coming to the next part of the question, and it says that the Mendeleev published the first periodic table in this 1869. Mendeleev used his knowledge of chemical periodicity to propose the properties of gallium. Gallium is 31 in the group 13 as a group 13 element. Now, table gives some chemical and the physical data of the elements of the group 13. Now, what do they give here? They have given us basically the densities, they have given us the boiling point, and they have given us the ionic radii of the cations. Now, boron and all these are basically our group 13 elements. Now, they're asking you to complete the table by predicting. They're asking you to suggest or predict the value of the missing data. So what is missing out here? So we have the density of aluminium missing out. We have the boiling point of indium missing out, and we have the cationic radii of gallium missing out. So we can see that when you talk about the density, look at the data here. So we can see there is an increase in the density as you go down the group. Now, when you look at the boiling point, okay, we can see that the boiling point are decreasing as you're going down the group. When we look at the cationic radii, we again see there's an increase in the cationic radii as we go down the group. So aluminium will be somewhere, it's because they're asking us to predict, so we can predict or suggest. So examiner has a particular range of the values where our answer should fit in. So keeping in mind the top and the bottom values, we can predict any value, the safer value, which is in between. So let's suppose if it is 2.34 for boron and gallium is 5.91, I can suggest something around 4. So I can have it as 4.0 or 4.2 or 4.5, something in between them. So that is a safer answer. Similarly, I can predict for the boiling point of indium, and it should again be between these two values and the safe value somewhere in the middle. So I can have 2400 is of gallium and the bottom one is 1460. So I can have somewhere around uh let's say I can have something around 1600 or around 1700. On the safer side, something as a uh, middle value. Similarly, this the top aluminium when you talk about the cation radii. So we have 0.050 of the aluminium and indium is 0.81. So something in between should be the middle value, should be the safer value. So I can predict something as 0.06 again. So that is the safest. So I have to predict the examiner has certain range in mind and definitely my answer because this is in the middle. So this will be the part of that range. Okay. Coming to the next part of the question, it's a D part. And here it says that indium and aluminium are the element in group 13 of the periodic table. Indium has a very similar chemical properties as aluminium. So these are the statement given to you for indium. Now, the first part, the first step, this says that indium react vigorously with hydrochloric acid to form the colorless gas and the salt in the solution, which is soluble in water. Then the second statement given was that the indium, it's In2O3, which is amphoteric in nature, same like your Al2O3, which is amphoteric in nature. Then the statement 3 says that gaseous indium bromide has a formula In2Br6. This molecule contains a coordinate bond, and this is a molecule which seems to be a dimer similar to Al2 Br6 because aluminium bromide also form a dimer, right? Now they're asking you identify the formula of the salt which is being formed when indium reacts with hydrochloric acid. So when aluminium reacts with the hydrochloric acid, we get AlCl3. Similarly, we'll be getting InCl3 over here. Coming to the part 2, they're asking me to construct the equation of indium oxide with the excess of NaOH. So because it's an amphoteric in nature, and when the aluminium combines with NaOH, we get the salt, which is basically Al, which is NaAlO4. This is known as sodium aluminate. So thinking of almost the same formula we can have for the indium. It's going to be sodium indium aluminate can be formed with the NaOH. And let's write down the remaining equation for that. In2O3, when it reacts with sodium hydroxide, I've already written down one of the product here, and this is excess of aqueous NaOH. So I'll also have water here. Now what I have to do is I have to balance my equation. So let me balance the equation. So I'll have 3 here and 2 will be here in order to have this as 4. 4, 3 plus I have here 2 NaOH. So this is my balanced equation. Part 3 says that draw a diagram that clearly shows the type of bond present in In2Br6. We already have studied the how to draw the structure of Al2Br6, where two aluminum are bonded to basically 6 bromine atoms. Now I'm going to draw the structure of Al2Br6 and then I'll be substituting indium in place of aluminium. So here I have one aluminium which is bonded with 3 bromine like this. And similarly, I have another aluminium which will be bonded to 3 bromine. So these are basically my 2 aluminum which are bonded with bromine. But as I know that aluminum has a bond, uh, aluminum is bonded with three bromine. In spite of that, aluminum is not completely has a completely stable octet. It still has the deficiency of two electrons, both the aluminum. So what will happen? The bromine lone pair, bromine will be sharing its lone pair with aluminum like this. So it will be forming a coordinate bond with the aluminum. So this is going to be my structure of Al2Br6. What I'll do, because indium also belongs to the same group, third group. So the same scenario will be with the indium as well. So what I'll do is I will be substituting the aluminium by indium. So if I'll substitute it, then the structure will be more or less like this. This is going to be the structure where the indium is having three covalent bond with three bromine, and it is going to have one coordinate bond with the bromine of the second molecule. Moving ahead, coming to question number 3, and it says that name the compound T is an isomer of hexane. This is compound T, and they're asking you to name the compound T. Now, let's look for the longest continuous chain. So this is going to be my longest continuous chain. Give me the longest continuous chain है with these as the branches. एक branch मेरी यहाँ पर है. This is one branch and this is another branch. So let me count. Let me see the number of carbons I have in my longest continuous chain. So the carbon I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 carbon are there. So this becomes your bute, and the double bonded between second and third carbon. So this is butene. And because I have two branches, the first branch is on the second and the second branch is on the third. So I have 2,3 dimethyl butene. So this is the name of this particular compound. Going further, it says that draw the skeletal formula of the structural isomer of T that shows cis and trans, or the geometrical isomerism, which is basically our hexene. And they're asking us to draw the geometrical cis or trans isomer. So this is what we will be having the structural formula. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 and with a double bond hexene. So if I'm going to have this as an alkyl group attached to this carbon double bond carbon, and this is another one, so I can have a cis where the hydrogen are on the same side, or they can be hydrogen on the opposite side. So this is going to be one skeletal formula. Or if I shift the double bond from 1 to 3, from between third to fourth की जगह अगर मैं second and third में shift कर दूं, so this can be my another isomer for the T. So these can be the two forms, right? Moving ahead, they're asking each carbon atom in T forms a sigma bond to at least one other carbon atom as shown over here. Each carbon atom in T forms a sigma bond to at least one other carbon atom as shown. So this is basically your structural formula for the T which they have shown above, which was a skeletal structure. Now let's go back and see that T which was drawn above. It was something like this. I'm just drawing it next to this figure. Okay, there was a double bond in between. So they're asking, there was a sigma bond. So whenever these are basically, there's a sigma here, there's a sigma here, there's a sigma here, and sigma here. So whenever you have a double bond, there's one sigma and there's another one, which is a pi bond. So on the diagram, draw the orbital that represent the pi bond that is also present in T. So we have a pi bond present over in this carbon-carbon bond. So we have a pi bond which is over here, which you can show it by an electron-rich area above the equator and below the equator like this. So this is a double bond which is going to show, which is basically a pi bond. Okay, state the hybridization of the two carbon atom between which the pi bond, so whenever you have a carbon double bond carbon, so hybridization is sp2 hybridization. That's a fact which you're supposed to know. Coming to the part D, a reactions scheme stating with T is shown below. The reaction 2 occurs in the presence of a catalyst. Knowledge of the mechanism for this reaction is not required. So basically what is happening? The double bond is being transformed into a single bond and the two OH are being added to it. और उसके बाद यहाँ पर हमारे पास aldehyde form हो रहा है. ठीक है, ये OH जो है वो कन्वर्ट होके यहाँ एल्डिहाइड फॉर्म कर रहा है और ये सब्सटेंस आपका जो है दिस इज बेसिकली लेबल्ड एज पी. Give the reagents and the condition for the reaction 1. So what is happening in reaction 1? The double bond is being changed and the two OH has been joined together, replacing the double bond. So basically this is depicting an alkene over here. और alkene का जब वहां पर डायोल बनता है तो ऑक्सीडेशन की वजह से बनता है, तो आपका ऑक्सीडेशन हो रहा है, तो रिएजेंट आप यूज करते हैं यहाँ पर कोल्ड एंड डाइल्यूट KMnO4, the oxidizing agent that is KMnO4. So this is the cold and dilute KMnO4, acidified KMnO4 you basically use here. Coming to the next part of the question, it says that state and explain how 2,4 DNPH, how 2,4 DNPH can be used to detect the presence of V as a product of the reaction 2. Now let's go back. Let's see what was V. So V is the substance with basically an aldehyde over here, C double bond. This is an aldehyde, right? So 2,4 DNPH will be giving you the observation when it is being going to be added to V. So we will be observing the orange PPT here. The orange precipitate will be formed. And this, the PPT, the orange PPT proves the presence of, it proves the presence of your carbonyl group. Carbonyl group. Coming to the next part of the question, and it is related to your infrared spectroscopy. Now it says that the progress of the reaction 2 can be monitored by the infrared spectroscopy. The absorption caused by OH is always present because water is also there. Water is being used as a solvent. So whenever the water is being used as a solvent, the presence of OH bond will be observed while having the infrared spectrus in the infrared spectrum. So they're asking you to identify two absorptions other than OH and the bonds which are responsible for these absorptions, with whose appearance will change significantly during the reaction. आपका जब reaction change over हो रहा है from step 1 to step 2, from ठीक है जो भी progression of the reaction है उसमें जो भी changes आ रहे हैं वो आपको यहाँ पर different absorption peak के basis पे और कौन से bonds responsible है वो आपको यहाँ पर mention करने हैं. ठीक है, so let's go back and see the reaction changes here. तो OH तो हमें नहीं मेंशन करना because OH उन्होंने ऑलरेडी कह दिया है कि OH जो है बेसिकली is can be the part of the solvent as well. So OH change of OH we will not show कि U से V जो है वो OH disappear हो रहा है. We don't have to mention it. Now, number one, what we will be showing, what we can tell them is that the appearance of C double bond O in V. तो V में सबसे पहले तो आपका C double bond O, which is a carbonyl group, और carbonyl group की जो absorptions आती हैं वो 1670 से लेकर 1740 के बीच में आती हैं, और इसके लिए आपको डेटा दिया हुआ होगा along with the question. दिस इज अ प्रीवियस ईयर पेपर जो 2021 के पेपर के साथ आपको डेटा बुकलेट्स मिलती थी, लेकिन अब पेपर के साथ आपको डेटा along with the question मिलेगा. So ये डेटा आपको, ये peaks की रेंज आपको दी हुई होगी along with the question. So we will be seeing that carbonyl group जो है वो absorption peak उसकी 1670 से लेकर 7040 तक के बीच में होती है. एक तो ये आप देखेंगे कि in we will be seeing the absorption at this. In U what we will be observing, U के अंदर ये देखिए, this is basically your C this is your carbon which is bonded to OH. Okay, this is your carbon which is bonded to OH. So carbon is bonded to oxygen, which is further bonded to H. So you will be seeing a peak for carbon and oxygen bond in you. So carbon oxygen peak we will be seeing between 1040 से लेकर 300 के बीच में ये कार्बन ऑक्सीजन पीक देता है। तो ये दो पीक्स जो होंगी ये शो करेंगी कार्बन ऑक्सीजन की, जो कि यू में एब्जॉर्प्शन शो की जाएगी, और वी में जो होगी वो पीक आएगी 1670 लेकर 740 तक ड्यू टू carbonyl groups, right? So this is what you'll be mentioning here as part one and part two. Okay, moving ahead now, let's move to the next part of the question, and this is E part of the question. The E part of the question states that in a wide range of organic reaction, V is the substance. Some reaction of V are shown over here. So V reacts with alkaline aqueous iodine. So that is an indication. This kind of a test is known as chloroform test. और आपका जब क्लोरोफॉर्म टेस्ट पॉजिटिव होता है तो इट विल बी गिविंग यू येलो पीपीटी, ये आपको येलो प्रेसिपिटेट्स देगा। ठीक है, so reaction 3 is basically with alkaline aqueous iodine, which is basically known as chloroform test. और येलो पीपीटी तब आएंगे जब क्लोरोफॉर्म टेस्ट पॉजिटिव होगा, और ये तब पॉजिटिव होता है जब आपके मिथाइल कीटोन आपका प्रेजेंट हो उस सब्सटेंस के अंदर। Now then V changes into X when the reaction, when NaBH4, which is basically my reducing agent, reacts with V. So this is ये यहाँ पे reduce होके ये आपका aldehyde है. This is going to transform and it is going to give you a alcohol. ठीक है, ये आपको alcohol दे रहा है. और रिएक्शन 5 में ये डिहाइड्रेशन हो रही है, और डिहाइड्रेशन से ये क्या बन रहा है, यू आर गेटिंग एन एल्कीन, or alkene ka polymerization say you will be getting a polymer. So this is a part of an organic synthesis. Now they're asking you V and W are colorless and soluble in water. They both are soluble in water and they're colorless nature. State what would you observe in reaction 3. In reaction 3, we are going to observe the yellow PPT because of the methyl ketone present there. Okay. आपके पास methyl ketone present है ये, which is going to give us basically yellow PPT in this E part 1. So that is an observation in E part 1. Coming to the E part 2, now the reaction 3 is a redox reaction. Identify which of the reactant is reduced in this reaction. So when you talk about they're talking about the reaction 3. Let's go and have a look at the reaction 3. This is the reaction 3, sorry. Let's go down. Okay, so this is basically my reaction 3, and they're saying this is a redox reaction. So what is happening over here? So basically iodine, when they'll be reacting with V, so it is going to form chloroform, which is basically CHI3. Okay, this is basically known as, the compound is known as triiodomethane. So here what is happening? The iodine is changing into iodide, right? So the oxidation number is changing from 0 to negative. Now, because the oxidation number is changing from 0 to negative, so that is why we will say that the iodine is changing to iodide ions. So here what is it stated as a redox, because the iodine is changing to iodide ions, where the oxidation number is changing from 0 to -1. Construct the equation for the reaction 4. Use H in the equation to represent an atom of hydrogen from NaBH4. So let's go back and check it out. What is reaction 4? Okay, so reaction 4 is this, right? So in reaction 4, we have here, we have CH3 here, we have CH3 here. This is again CH3, this is OH, and we have CH3. So let's count all the carbon and all the hydrogen here. So when we count all the carbon and the hydrogen and oxygen, we get to know its molecular formula is C6H14O. Okay. And what is the molecular formula of the compound, which is V? So let's count all the carbon and hydrogen and oxygen from this as well. So this is again your CH3. This is again your CH3. This is again your CH3 and CH3. So when we count all the carbon and hydrogen, so we get C carbon here. So we have C6 and it's H12 and O, and it's already given in the equation part. So we have 614 C6H14O here and C6H12O here. So C6H12O is basically reacting with a reducing agent, which is basically forming, which I counted the number of carbon and hydrogen on the previous page, which was C6H, not 12, this is 14, which is C6H14 and O. So we can see there is an addition of two hydrogen here. So if I'll put two hydrogen, then this equation I'll have, and it's a balanced equation. Then moving ahead to the next part of the question, X is a mixture of two optical isomers. Draw the two optical isomers in the box provided. Let's go back and see what is X in the above equation. So this is basically my X. This is my X. So X is basically, they're saying that it is an optical isomer. Now let's check it out. How come it's an optical isomer? I have a carbon here with the C3CH3. I have a carbon here with an OH, and it has a CH3, and I have an H. So this whole becomes one group, and these are three different groups which are attached to this carbon. So because of this, this is going to be my chiral carbon. And the chiral carbon will definitely have its mirror image. Going back and drawing the optical isomers for this. So when I have to draw the optical isomers and I have to draw the 3D structure in order to have an optical isomer, so I'll draw a wedge shape here, showing it's coming out of the plane of a paper, and along the plane of a paper, let's say I have OH here, and this is basically CH3 here, and I had carbon, and to that carbon there were three CH2, three groups attached. So on having a mirror image to this, the other optical isomer which I can have with this will be basically, I'll be having C with three CH3 groups here. This is a carbon. This is along the plane of the paper. It is on the other side here, and this is coming out of the plane of the paper. This is H. So these are going to be my two optical isomers. Moving ahead, both the optical isomers of X can be dehydrated to form a single product Y, right? Give a reagent and conditions required for the reaction 5. So they were showing that the dehydration is taking place, and when the dehydration was taking place, they were forming an alkene here. So the dehydration was taking place, and on dehydration in the reaction 5, an alkene was being formed. So let's go back and see what are they asking. They're asking that this optical isomer of an X, it was dehydrated to form a single product Y, and give the reagents and the conditions to required to in the reaction. They're not asking the product, they're just asking you the conditions and the chemical which is going to dehydrate. So the dehydrating agent, we very well know, is concentrated sulfuric acid, and we will be using heat as a condition. Coming to the last part of the paper, it's part 4, and it says that you have to draw one repeat unit for the addition polymer, which has been formed after the monomer, the polymer for the monomer, which has been formed. This is basically my uh, monomer. ये मेरा monomer है जिससे मुझे polymer draw करना है. I have to construct the polymer from this basically monomer, right? So I have to construct my Z from this monomer. right? So let's draw it over here. So it has one carbon with another carbon connected, and this has three CH3 groups attached to it. And there was a double bond with this carbon, and I had hydrogen here. So this is हाइड्रोजन हेयर एज वेल, सही है, क्योंकि मेरे पास जो स्ट्रक्चर था मोनोमर का, वो स्ट्रक्चर जो था, दैट वाज समथिंग लाइक दिस, इट वाज अ स्केलेटल डायग्राम. सो इट वाज समथिंग लाइक दिस. ठीक है, ये कार्बन था, इस कार्बन के साथ वी हैड थ्री CH3s here, and this was a double bond here. सही है, this was a double bond. So this I have transformed into this part. So this is again going to be your H, and here I have two H. So ये double bonded structure, this is a monomer. So इस skeletal structure को मैंने इस तरह से convert कर लिया, and I made a monomer out of it. अब इस monomer को I'll be converting into my polymer. I'll be converting into my polymer. So what I'll do for a polymer, I'll remove my double bond. I'll remove the double bond from here. I'll just make it a single bonded carbon with the hydrogen on the top, with this carbon, with the three alkyl group attached, and then the hydrogen and hydrogen in order to satisfy the carbon. The similar linkage or similar repeat unit will be connected n number of times. So this is going to be my polymer, right? Is it clear? So now reaction 6 does not proceed quickly at the room temperature. Suggest why is this the case? So definitely if the reaction is not spontaneous, then you need to heat it, right? You need to apply certain conditions to it. तो टेम्परेचर रेज आपको करना पड़ेगा. अगर आप रेज टेम्परेचर पे वो रिएक्शन हो रहा है, रूम टेम्परेचर पे वो रिएक्शन नहीं हो रहा स्पॉन्टेनियसली, तो दैट मीन्स इट नीड्स higher activation energy. It require higher activation energy, right? That is why it was not taking place spontaneously. With that, we have finished with the paper, and good luck for your CIEs. And if you like my way of solving the paper, kindly like and share and subscribe the channel. Thank you.